We will touch upon whether an IFC is the right thing or a regional financial center, but we leave that for a little bit later. First, we would like to have a look at the view of a credit rating agency, and Vladimir Redkin is going to share his views about how, I think, powerful agencies, as you are, look at Russia, but also look at Russian cities. Very interesting, your views.
Спасибо. Thank you very much to the organizers, and thank you the audience that you're still with us, even though it's already late. I will try to be concise, even though my presentation is quite a lengthy one. It's got a lot of general stuff. I will try to focus more on specific things that characterize Moscow as, let me say, one of the leaders, or the leader among Russian subnational entities in terms of its financial performance and management quality, and in terms of economic indicators and living standards. Well, I have some general slides as well. We based our approach on in terms of the assessment of solvency of regions. Since we are a global ratings agency, we look at country risks, and we attach primary significance to institutional systems, institutional framework. And for Moscow, I think that factor ranks first in terms of its importance, because as we will later see, in terms of other factors that are objectives and are measurable and can have a quantitative estimates, Moscow is a very good performer, not just in comparison with Russian regions, but also if compared to regions in Europe, for example. So the quality of institutional system has a great importance. A lot has been said on this. And we could, of course, recall things like lack of transparency in the budgeting systems, the instability of tax systems in terms of delegation of authorities between different tiers of the budgetary system in the Russian Federation. And Moscow, in that respect, has to be confronted with certain limitations of this institutional structure, and is different from other regions of the Russian Federation in the sense that Russia, well, it's probably something sad for the mayor and for the city government. Actually, the rating of Moscow as a city coincides with the rating attached to the country as a whole, with the sovereign rating of Russia. And moreover, the sovereign rating is limiting the rating of Moscow, the standalone rating of Moscow.
So we can remember also development of different national reforms, structural reforms, then also reducing dependency of the budget system on the crude prices. So those factors, if we analyze them, even generally, we can see that not many things are really dependent on Moscow and its policy. There are certain factors standing behind the Russian Federation, and for Moscow, unfortunately, they also work. So that is why, if we can say that Moscow is kind of a hostess from the point of view of the country rating. If we'll have a look at other factors, and here we talk about debt load, budget situation, administration, economic development. Here I have a number of slides where you can see different comparison data. You can see that Moscow is positioned quite nicely. One of the major indices direct debt to current balance, Moscow right now is is at the first position. Then you can see these indices for regions with different ratings, Fitch ratings, triple B, triple B minus, double B plus, etc. So you can see that Moscow is about 0.8 years here. But on the whole, I can say that 15% of debt load is quite a low figure. And of course, here we still have some, certain platform to develop. So the main issue is to find investment projects that would be financed by attracted capital. And connection between debt policy and investment policy is perhaps one of the most important factors that for Moscow plays a great role, not only for Moscow, but for other regions of the Russian Federation as well. One of the key moments that we consider when carrying out our analysis. So if you have a look at budget indices, operational balance or current balance, of course, here we talk about two different notions, but they are on the same level. It is higher than 20%. What does this mean? This means that 20% of revenue stays in the municipal budget after all the expenditure has been taken. Salaries, utilities, subsidies, social subsidies, everything. So this means that we are talking about quite a large profit that can be used to finance capital expenditure. Then the other graph shows you deficit of the budget. For Moscow, the budget was in profit. For other regions, you can see, here we are talking about average data. So some of the regions, of course, had profit budgets, but on the average, they're mostly in shortfall. Well, so next one, current transfers. So for Moscow, this factor is not so critical because here we are talking about only 10% of operational expenditure that goes for transfers. And most of this share, those are not targeted transfers. So those are mostly transfers for federal mandates. Those are the authority of federal institutions that have been transferred to municipal and regional level. Economics and social sphere. So I'm not going to dwell here in details. Ekaterina, in her presentation, had said a lot about it. According to its economic development and human resources, Moscow occupies very high position. And SWOT analysis, of course, always considers these factors and shows the distribution of these factors. So over here, you can see that Moscow is quite ahead of other regions of the Russian Federation. If we talk about the budgetary revenues per capita, again, Moscow is quite ahead here. Well, this speaks about a privileged position of Moscow from the point of view of financial and budgetary potential and the level of development level that has already been achieved by the city. Well, if we try to evaluate the quality of administration, well, we do not have any figures here because we're talking about qualitative, not quantitative analysis. But we believe that administrative quality in Moscow is also positioned at a high level. Then the last slide is the one that shows you certain information. This credit rating was confirmed in January 2012. And which were the major factors considered? status of a capital, financial and political center of the country, strong budgetary indices, a low level of debt load if compared to a long-term profile of repayments, which is quite scarcely met among other regions of the Russian Federation. And this differs Russian regions from European regions when compared to their European capitals. And the last factors are quite more limiting. Here we're talking about large volume of state sector. So right now we are facing certain reforms here, optimization in this field, and over the last 2 years we have seen really favorable steps from our point of view. And here we are talking about lowering indirect risks, implied risks. So another limiting factor, and I believe for Moscow it is very difficult to deal with it. It is out there in the market. Maybe in the future we will be able to solve the issue, but this is not an issue of 1 or 2 coming years. This is dependency on direct taxes, and mostly here I talk about profit tax. So this is perhaps the specific feature of our budget. And if you remember, during the last crisis, we have seen really significant reduction in our profit sector of our budget, municipal budget, because the resources that the city has accumulated, they were enough to actually get over the shock, but still it showed our great dependency. Well, thank you very much for your attention. That was my last slide.
One of the questions that comes up easily is that people say, well, Moscow and Russia, do investors look different to Moscow than they look to Russia? And can Moscow distance itself from some of the institutional problems that Russia has? How would you look at it from a rating point of view?
Тут трудно, спасибо за вопрос, трудно отвечать за инвесторов, так как
It is very difficult to talk for investors since we are not an investor, we are a rating agency. But from the point of view of investors, of course, there is a difference in institutional environment. Well, it seems to be the same for the whole territory of the Russian Federation, but it is not so. The difficulties that are encountered on the regional level, they're simply not out there for Moscow. If you remember, we were talking about current transfer level for Moscow. It is not that high as it is for the regions. Well, Moscow is quite in a favorable position here. In a way, it is in a more privileged position, in a more privileged situation. But on the other hand, as I have said, Moscow rating is unfortunately limited by sovereign rating, and investors look at the country as a whole, and they understand that institutional environment depends on the federal government, not municipal government. So that is why when you have a look at Moscow, you always look back at the federal government and look at their decisions. And I believe that investors simply have to remember about that all the time, and they do remember, and they understand that Moscow is not some independent entity. Even though we have a federal organizational structure, still we have a very high centralized level of government, of administration. And if Moscow can come with a better level of cooperation with investors, with improving its institutional situation, still any global decisions can be made only after consultancy on the federal level. So once again, we are talking about high level of centralization in our country.